there's a new environment. We've got an environment of triple bottom line accounting systems today that we didn't have 15 years ago. I think also it's a little bit more, the soft sciences today is becoming more hard sciences. And those are all contributing factors to say, guys, no, let's go and reanalyze again. People that work in a happy environment is more productive. What is that worth? And I think in a I like to call it the post-recessive economy, after the Great Recession of a couple of years ago, which we haven't recovered from, we can't afford to think in ways we did pre-recession. We have to think of new ways to solve the problem. And I think the major element is that at a certain level of contribution and cognitive contribution, your money is not that relevant anymore. It seems funny, but people want to work for a cause much more than they want to work for, a financial objective. And I think if you can bring that cause back to a sustainable element, that obviously drives the money-making model. So it's driving profitability without focusing so much on the bottom line. And I think that's the contribution in wellness. You can only do that if individuals is balanced, work-life balance is in order, work dynamics, and maybe if I can add one more element that just from our research is so prominent and where we're sitting with significant generational, we're going to have 4 generations in the workplace soon. And people starting with second, third, fourth careers at the age of 60, 70 is becoming very real. How do we harvest that, and how does that add value? And a very fascinating study from Harvard Business, of Harvard rather, is it's the oldest study Harvard has. It's more than 80 years old. Where every year they took 200 Harvard grads and 200 inner city Boston folk. And they've been doing that for the last 80 years, and they've evaluated everything, and they've obviously seen a couple of presidents, billionaires. They've seen people go from riches to rags and rags to riches and everything in that study. But the most fascinating point now is that people that live into their old age has got one common denominator, and it's not money, it's not anything other than they've had the ability to build positive human relationships. And I think those are the elements that we are missing in the workplace. Do people really actually get along? Do they enjoy what they do? You need the awareness, and that's, for example, with Bestmed, our marketing department is very involved in the marketing of wellness in the organization. And yes, it does start with a wellness day, because often, if I just take myself, I was at a couple of years ago at a point where I said, it's a waste of time, why are we doing this, etc. But when I went, and the nurse actually came to get me out of my office, dragged me there, and once I got over being afraid of needles and everything and sat down, and I realized, well, my BMI is out of kilter. I should be on chronic medication for high blood pressure, etc., etc., etc. The realization that I need to change my lifestyle was done. So that's the purpose of the wellness day, is to make you aware of your health status. And what we're seeing currently in Bestmed is that at this stage 56% of people actually change their lifestyle if they know there's a problem. So I think that's the purpose of then after that, it's a function of communication, and then it's a function of saying, okay, but how do we get it into the DNA, and how do we make it fun? And I think that's often where we drop the ball. It's high level, so we know X amount of people is diabetic or hypertensive or HIV positive or whatever, and we kind of try and manage the statistic as a whole. Right? What are we going to do? Well, let's get better seating or ergonomic arrangements, and those things are valuable. But more important is the change only happens once the people go to the cafeteria and say, listen guys, why don't you sell apples as well? You know, simple things. But I think the change dynamic is people dependent. If I can just elaborate the point, if your best friend is obese, you've got, I think, something like a 40% chance of also being obese. If your spouse and your best friend is obese, you've got something like an 80% chance of being obese yourself. So, but the change is also true. If your best friend takes you to have an apple at the cafeteria, you've got a very good chance of changing your lifestyle. So it's getting to the change agents in the organization that's very important. The role of healthcare providers or suppliers of healthcare and employers, and then just to bring triangulation properly into the question, maybe the funders of health is also often, you know, indirectly the employer or the employee even, but that's the interesting dynamic between these three parties. So you might say that, you know, as a healthcare provider, you know, yes, we know prevention is better than cure, but you know, I know if my patients are too healthy, they don't come back. You know, so it is an important aspects. Obviously, you know, service providers, medical service providers, got very high ethical standards, and you know, the oath of Hippocrates is still very relevant in that space. So we do believe that they ultimately care for their patients, but there's not very good relationships on that level. Yes, some of the manufacturing environments, mining, those type of environments has got, you know, on-site occupational health abilities and so on. And that's where it is almost strange that the biggest need in terms of that is actually on the white-collar workers. Because there's very little discussion between employers and service providers, and often, you know, client-patient relationships does constrain that. But I think that's also once again where the funder wants to add better value, not from a disclosing ABC person has got XYZ disease, and no, to reveal, you know what, you've got a prevalence of, let's say, 5% of high cholesterol employees. We've got studies that say stress-related scenarios, you know, is conducive to hypertension and cholesterol buildup. Why don't we, you know, look in terms of getting a method where we can identify on a voluntary basis those individuals that's got a lot of stress. Now, just to elaborate on this. Sayika, the chartered accountants, did a study a couple of years ago, which was quite fascinating, where and we all know that financial uncertainty is a major driver of stress, and stress is a major driver of illness. So what they realized, what was fascinating about the scenario, is that they couldn't find any correlation between financial uncertainty and job security. So we would think people in a secure job is financially certain, is stress lower, but it wasn't the case. And often what we find is that people maybe in a very entrepreneurial environments got very little job security, but they've planned for it. And accordingly, there's less financial uncertainty. And that's really what I think drove the realization. We then got involved and we went to see, okay, but people with that's got financial certainty, disregarding level of income, what was the common denominator there? And we realized common denominators there is that they all have household budgets. They're very diligent around their finances. They write expenses and income up, and they kind of stick to that. And that's why, as a medical aid, we're not a financial advisory. We don't render those services. But what we want to tell people is just be fit. Just write down, do the budget, get into control of your money. And the effect that will have in terms of optimizing job satisfaction, engagement at the workplace, and just feeling better about yourself and being more healthy is phenomenal. And I think those are the smaller messages where I think engagements needs to be more direct between service providers and employers, because maybe it's not allergy to gluten that's the problem. Maybe it is I'm financially unsure, and maybe there's other ways to look at that.